There. All right. Woo. There we are. So we're finally set. So
Excellent.
Tell them who you are and we'll go.
Awesome. All right, guys. Nice to meet you. My name is Alex Levinson. I am a senior engineer at
Shutting down.
Yeah, good.
I'm a senior engineer at Uber. I've been at Uber for about 4 years now. I am the national R&D lead for the national CCDC Red Team, and I'm also one of the competition directors for CPTC, which I think you guys compete in, both that and CCDC. I'm here at your invite today, so.
So I drug him along because I knew that I wouldn't have enough to say to fill an hour. So my name is Lucas Morris. I am a senior manager at Crow. So Crow is the, depending on how you measure it, what day it is, between 7th and 10th largest consulting firm in the United States. My team, I am actually one of the senior managers that's in charge of our penetration testing, red teaming, ethical hacking, and virtual information security office solutions. I also am one of the leaders in our Dallas office for the firm itself. So I have been doing security for almost 15 years now. I'm officially old. And also, I guess on the other side, I'm also a member of the national CCDC Red Team, more on the volunteer side. Also one of the leads of the Southwest CCDC Red Team, and then one of the 2 or 3 main leads of CPTC. So that's how I know a lot of y'all.
Yeah. And yeah,
So what do you want to talk about? What do you all want to hear? We've been doing this collectively for like 20, 25 years.
About like CCDC Red Team experience.
Interesting stories. Here, we'll just make a list.
Like
Okay.
the entire archive or everyone?
All right.
What else?
What do you look for in a test report at the competitions?
How about we do that in general?
Okay.
Because I do those almost every day. Yeah, I should add, I am in consulting, so I go from client to client to client. That's why I'm based out of Dallas, but that's why I'm here, because I had a client that needed some things.
Yes. Any other requests?
Say a CPTC strategy for a team.
Ooh. Are we going to be okay talking directly about CPTC this close to the competition?
Why don't you rephrase your question? Take 2. I think we could talk about that. Consulting strategies for Red Team.
Yeah.
When you think about bank security, what comes to mind?
We may decline to talk about a lot there. I see what you did there.
Yes.
But
And then we had the other one. World without Splunk.
oh yeah.
How many of you guys have used Splunk here? Great.
What about?
Let's talk about it. Great.
I'm kind of curious about balancing security and availability, like more on the IT world.
Okay. That's a good one. I almost think that's even broader in balancing security inside an organization as a whole. I have to deal with that a lot as the security officer of several different organizations virtually. And it's tough.
All right. That's a good list.
That's a good list.
All right. Let's do this.
Actually, one more.
Yes.
About like certificates, like I don't know, OSCP.
I can answer that for you. Don't get them.
I'll give you a better answer.
As an employer, I don't care.
So I think it really depends, right? That's the very consulting answer. If someone says it depends, they're probably a consultant and you're paying them way too much for them to answer the question that way. But as a consultant, it depends. I think there are some organizations where it doesn't matter. There's a lot where it doesn't. You don't even need an advanced degree or other things. Some places require a master's, a PhD. It really depends. So there are some certifications that I think are very, very valuable because it does give you an opportunity to build knowledge around a set in an overall industry that is frankly so broad. Even I've been doing this for 15 years and I can't keep it all in my head. So
yeah, like I would say absorb information, not certificates.
yes. So I in general at work, because we have to be accredited by the Public Accounting Board, because that's what consultancies often have to do. We look at the CISP, the OSCP, and the C-RISC as our security certs. C-RISC? It's like
C-RISC.
yeah.
Certified ethical hacker,
We don't use that one, mostly because in the past, the people that we've seen that have had it, at least from an accreditation perspective, it's very tool focused. Now they've rebuilt a lot of it in version 5, and I think now version 6 as well. I don't pay attention as much to it, but it's not something we've looked at as much. I see a lot of organizations that have it. So in general, for me, when I see a resume and someone has 20 certifications, I am immediately turned off because that means they're good at reading something and regurgitating it and they have no idea what it means. But when we have someone that wants to, so we have a lot of people that do like IT audits or a more kind of general controls, broader type work that's very valuable, but they want to get into security. One of the first things I tell them is, okay, great. I want you to go build an AD environment. I want you to do some networking. I want you to write some code. Come back to me. And a lot of times they come back to me, it's like, okay, I did these things. Where do I go next? Well, let's pick a cert because now you have 50 different domains you have to study, and a certification will help you do that.
If you say so. I like
Based on my experience.
I think that, SANS, for example, does a lot of certifications, and their classes have a lot of good information in them. But as somebody who I have no name brand certificates to my name,
When you said SANS, like SANS Institute, right?
Mhm,
Those
yeah.
are like the $7,000.
Look,
class.
yeah, you can get good information out of those. But again,
Like if you're an employer is paying for it.
Sure.
regardless of who's paying for it,
Anybody to myself.
sure. I'm not saying you self-pay for it. I'm saying that those are usually taken as part of certifications. And so the knowledge, like the value there is not the fact that you walk out with like a GCIH or something like that, or a GPEN coming out of a SANS class. The value is the information that you assimilate in that. But as somebody that's never taken any of those classes, I don't feel deficient. I feel like the absorption of knowledge can occur in a lot of different ways. And if you don't want to, if you can't or don't want to pay that premium, don't. There's all sorts of ways to obtain an open source education in security.
I think, so I'm going to add on to that a little bit that I completely agree. I think it depends on how you learn. And everybody learns differently. So some people learn very well, frankly, getting a job at it and figuring out as they go. Some learn well getting some AWS credits and just starting to build stuff. Some people learn really well having structure and moving through it. And I think if that's how you learn, get a cert. Now the other thing though is our industry is starting to change. And we are looking at now, there are people that are accrediting PhDs just in security. There are things that are happening. So it depends on the organization you go to.
Mm-hmm.
I can't hire someone without a bachelor's. It is just by nature of the Public Accounting Board of the United States, Peekaboo, requires it of every employee.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't do it. Now,
Which means he couldn't hire me.
right, but I've
Now,
hired
is that a
people.
good thing?
Yes, objectively. But no, it would be a bad thing. But we've hired people. We have people on our team with degrees in liberal arts, with bachelors. One guy has a bachelor's in public works or architecture. It's really interesting when you're driving to a client. He's like, see, what they really need to be doing is this with these lights, and this is why this sucks. And actually, we've put it to use at a client before. So that's the cool thing about security is it spans so much that you really are never bereft of the information that you've learned before. But at the same point, I think it just depends on where you're going and how you learn. And I think the latter is more important.
Do you watch Star Trek? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Which one?
Consider yourself a member of the Borg collective and consider knowledge something to assimilate, and don't. Like, that's your top priority, assimilating knowledge.
It changes so fast that the things I do now, even though my level has changed, the things our new people do now than what we did when I started at this 15 years ago is so drastically different.
Mm-hmm.
And if we hadn't kept up on it the whole time, we would have been worthless within 2 or 3 years.
But as you keep building on those foundations, and just because stuff ages out, concepts don't necessarily age out, right? So like, HTTP 2 is coming around as a protocol, as a next-gen web protocol, right? Now, HTTP is still around. Is my knowledge of HTTP going to just magically dissipate overnight? No.
Right, you can build on it. It's like about
Yes.
Right, exactly. And like there's a lot of, I would say, concepts and theory behind security and computer science that will continue to live indefinitely. And really, this is one of the reasons I'm not so hot on certifications, because certifications primarily focus a lot on tools and techniques, and those change. Now, concepts, that's the slower moving boat.
Yep.
All right. Do we want to save this for the end?
Yeah.
Because that just sounds
We could
fun.
do that for 2 hours.
Uh,
Between CPTC, CCDC,
all
and
right,
all
let's
the-
just start next and go.
Okay, so we hold. You want me to talk reporting?
Absolutely.
Oh, of course, I get the
I don't-
trash can. This is dead.
Yeah, you got here, red.
I know. I got other colors. I'm gonna sit. Okay, there we go. Close enough. Okay, so
Reporting.
yes, I'm getting my head together. So, question for everybody: what do you do in a consulting firm? How do you do a pen test? Broadly.
The scope.
Okay, so you define a scope. That's good. What else?
Start researching all those endpoints, like all everything within the company.
Okay. So discovery.
Yeah.
Rules of engagement.
You set.
To talk to the customer, find out what they want.
Yeah. So I would put this in here. Your rules of engagement. What else? Okay, so you have issues.
Findings.
What else?
Oh yeah, the pay and the amount of work.
Sure, cost and all that. I'm not going to write that up here. Yes. Paperwork. That's my life now. I'm in management.
Here's remediation after the issues and findings.
Remediation.
Who does that?
What's that?
Who does that?
Ooh, that's a good question.
It's generally the organization that hires the pen tester that's responsible for remediation.
Where does your responsibility as the pen tester end and that company's start?
I would say the pen tester outlines the issues and gives it an initial severity or risk, evaluates the risk, and presents a recommendation if they see a clear way to fix it. But then ultimately the responsibility to fix it falls on the organization.
Whose responsibility is it to determine the reasonableness of that recommendation?
The organization, because they know their environment the best, and ultimately their executives have to determine what level of risk is at.
How much do they know, though, about the security issue?
But their security teams can ultimately have to translate those and present them to executive leadership, and ultimately.
What if they don't have a security team?
You can assume that your audience is going to have anywhere from 0 to plenty of technical knowledge.
Yes.
So
One thing that you can assume, I think, is that they're going to appreciate some understanding of the business impacts of what might happen.
what was that word? There was a word you said right in there. Understanding the
Business impacts.
I think that, there we go. So I'm not saying you're wrong, because you're not. At the end of the day, the company is ultimately going to own fixing it or not. And your recommendation is your best guidance as to what they should do to fix that. Now, understanding business impact about what you're asking, I would say is your job as the consultant. You have to understand what you're recommending and if that's reasonable to the business to be asking.
You can do that to some extent, but what about, like, you can have as good of an understanding of the business as the senior level management or the executives at that business would. So, like, you're supposed to have like a general knowledge of the business and, you know, have certain details, but you can't give them as good of a recommendation as they, in theory, would be able to because they fully understand their business. No matter how good of a pen testing you are, you're not going to fully understand their business.
Correct.
in a amount of time.
So you are not, right? You are not going to understand their business as well as they will. And they will never understand the security as well as you do. So what do? We have to partner together. We talk. We generate a report. We do all of those things. So there's one other thing I'm kind of looking for in here. There's one thing we're missing in my mind. Summarization. Okay, so we are just talking about reports for now. There are a lot of different things that you can put in here. And as you said, you may have to assume zero security knowledge all the way up to way more knowledgeable than you are. So how do you do that? You write multiple things in the report. All right, I'll tell you how we do it at work. Right, there's an executive summary. And our audience here is a C-level, board member. And what do we cover? Our scope, and the summary, and the business impact. Because these are the things they care about. Now, business impact can get very difficult to define to someone at that level. When you say to an IT administrator, oh yeah, I got domain admin, they're like, oh, yeah. Sorry. You say that to a CIO, and they're like, okay, yeah, that's bad. You say it to a CEO, and they're like, I'm sorry, I stopped listening. What were you saying? So you have to communicate this, and you don't communicate everything. We at work only will summarize a few issues. Generally, anything we've rated high or moderate, critical, but it really depends. If we've got a really bad client, we may only put 3 or 4 things up there, and we may summarize them. So if we're finding reused passwords on workstations, and we crack 40% of the passwords in Active Directory, and there are poor key management on their Unix boxes, and I mean, a few other issues, we may roll that up into, you have a access management problem, or you have a password management problem. And we define it at a very high level, and frankly, 3 or 4 sentences or less. Anything more, they're not reading anymore. And then we put a table summarizing everything. So they can see, yes, we actually did work. So then after that, we have findings and recommendations. And it's detailed language. But our audience here is not an administrator or an engineer. It's a manager. So there's enough information in there that you can resolve it. We're recommending tools. If it's a group policy, we include everything in the GPO that you might need, but it is ultimately driven at the person that is going to decide, what are we doing? How much time does it take? Where are we at? And then we put together a separate document that is a tech doc. And this is a list of every IP address and every host and every recommendation. And an engineer can take this and actually start to fix the issues. But we go to 3 different audiences in our reporting.
Now, I'll say this.
And that's how we do it. There are a lot of ways.
And this is the point I'm making, is that there's a lot of good pen test firms out there that will give you a report that might look different than this, but the intent.
Yes.
Of I'm going to communicate I'm going to communicate the same cohesive message to multiple audiences with different levels of knowledge and different considerations that they're giving to the business. I'm going to communicate the same message to multiple audiences. How I write my reports, before Uber, I was a consultant and I was writing reports, was different. We didn't have a separate tech doc. We had 3 sections where we essentially said this first section is for C-level executives and people who are going to spend 5 minutes reading this and go, okay. Next section is going to be for directors and managers of the company. And then the next section is going to be for engineers. Now, stuff like a group policy finding, that's going to be in the engineering section. Yep. But we're going to communicate the same information. Just it's really about the level of detail and the language that we're using to target those audiences.
So,
but at the end of the day, all 3 of those audiences should be able to read the document in their respective sections, and then in a meeting be able to share the same outcome, the same understanding of where the business is from a risk perspective.
So, and I completely agree. You will see, this is how we do it, but ultimately the goal here is you generally have these 3 levels you have to communicate to. So, There's a couple other things that I think are really important that I see as things that are missing in either the reports that I see from other firms, the folks at our firm that are new. So what is risk?
Yeah.
Can you toss that eraser at me? What is risk? There's a formula for it. What is it? Does anybody know? Nope.
Likelihood times severity.
So give me that black pen. I'm running out of markers. Has anybody ever seen that before? Okay, likelihood times impact minus a mitigation factor is your residual risk. Okay, so what is risk? Risk is likelihood times impact, severity. So likelihood, how often is it going to happen? Is this a 1-year flood, a 5-year flood, a 10-year flood, a 100-year flood? Right? Am I going to get hacked every week? Am I going to get hacked every month? Are my users going to get social engineered 20 times a day? Do I only have 100 users and I'm only going to have it happen once a day or once a week? What's the chance I get ransomware? Well, if you're a city in Texas right now, it's really bad, high likelihood. Impact, how bad is it? Domain administrator password. Well, bad, but the impact's not horrible because it's on an internal network. Domain controller exposed with a 1-to-1 NAT on the internet and no port restrictions. Bad. Have seen that multiple times. Right? SQL injection, so blind SQL injection versus regular SQL injection, active, right? Those are very different impacts. So, go ahead.
I would just add that impact often is contextual.
Yes.
Like
100%.
You know, as somebody writing the report, just because you see online another report or some example where they're saying SQL injection, hi. Well, if the data that's coming out of the SQL injection is say it was a test MySQL installation that didn't have any data at all in it, what's the impact there compared to the impact of SQL injection where customer information is getting exposed, right? Understanding that in terms of impact is something to be very mindful of.
And so I'm sure you probably can't read this. I know my handwriting is awful, but one of the things you have to, so to Alex's point, is inherent versus residual. So inherent is how bad is it trying to remove as much of the context as you can. But you never can remove all of it. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So like CVEE and CVSS, they try and create some math around this. And there's some things that they will do to define impact, define likelihood. And you can do it based on number of records and exposure and all of those things. At work, to be honest, we do it off of gut and experience because there are so many factors, you can't ever take it all into account. So that builds an inherent risk. But the inherent risk doesn't take into account any mitigation I may have. So you break into, we're in the middle of a red team right now. We have several workstations that we've got Trojans running on. We've been in there for a month. No one has found us. So what are mitigation factors? Those are all your monitoring. That's any governance you've got, any people, any systems, right? All the things that we do to reduce risk, that's mitigation.
Right.
And when we think about this from a technical perspective, and this is where I think a lot of people that I work with get lost, is they think, oh yeah, mitigation, that's me patching, and that's me doing vuln scanning, and that's me having Splunk, and that's me doing analysis, and that's me having a managed security firm that's monitoring everything. But to be honest, some of the best mitigation strategies I've ever seen are have a policy and follow it, having a build procedure, having some sort of governance around it. Don't get me wrong, the technical things are also really important. But people miss out on a lot of low-hanging fruit that they could fix if they just standardize a little bit. So when you take your inherent risk and you reduce mitigation, that's where you end up with residual risk. And residual risk, when people in security start talking about that, that's usually what they're talking about. That's everything Alex is talking about. We're taking into account not just all the context, but all the other things that you're doing. Now, when we do this at work, sometimes we don't have a chance to test mitigation. But if you're doing a pen test and not a red team, your goal is to come in, test as much as possible, as quick as possible. So what are they doing? They're not alerting on us. They're putting whitelists in and other things. Then the client comes in and starts to argue, well, we would have caught you. Yeah. And so sometimes you have to be very specific, but you have to understand the difference between inherent and residual risk. Because I think that is probably this right here, and then I have one other thing, are the two things that I see people coming into the security industry that they miss. That we are technologists, but we are also risk professionals. So from a reporting perspective, this is big.
Likelihood and impact to me as something that he's not wrong. Like there isn't a good formula for it. You have to feel it out in the client. And the thing that taught me that was experience of just doing it. And I would say that as I did test after test after engagement after engagement, what I really began to understand is the concept of like, just because we're doing a fast red team and I'm not like doing surveys on like, what is your endpoint protection? It doesn't matter what it is. Did it stop me? Right. Did it, and remembering that stuff, right? Like being able to see holistically what I just did in this red team. Was this, why was I able to do this? And just keeping track of those things helped really refine those L&I numbers and the mitigation factor in a lot of ways when you're coming down to actually writing a report and understanding it. You know, the client doesn't need every single finding you have. If you have 1,000 findings and 900 of them are cross-site scripting on a website that's not used and has no user base, they don't need to know about it. And like 10 things are like your domain controller sitting on the internet. That's what they need to know about. Yeah. And fixing that, you do them a disservice by giving them so much noise and taking away from that.
Yep, absolutely. So next piece of risk. What are the 4 things? Well, there are 5. But if you're not a bad actor, because you can always exploit a risk. So if we're trying to resolve issues, what are the 4 things you can do with risk? I'm not expecting you all to know the answer, but you gotta help me sound this out.
Mitigate.
Mitigate. Mitigate. Transfer. Accept.
Compensate.
Resolve.
What's
the term for? I had to look up the specific terms. Avoid. So we have these 4. You guys, so mitigate should be fairly straightforward, right? Your domain controller is on the internet, pull it off the internet, fix it. What is transferring risk? What would be a good example of transferring your risk? Insurance. Exactly. What is accepting the risk?
Do nothing.
Doing nothing. Yes. And what is avoiding a risk?
Turning it off.
You quit doing that process.
Quit doing that thing.
Nullify it.
Essentially nullify it. Now, resolving an issue, right? Mitigate and avoid could be very, so if I have the domain controller, if I were to avoid the risk, I would pull it off the internet. I still have a DC, but now I've made it internal. Okay? Mitigate would be, well, it has to be out there because I don't know how ADFS works, and I've decided this is how companies are getting to me. So what can I do? This would be, I put maybe a monitor in front of it. Put some sort of firewall or intrusion detection. Maybe some very advanced monitoring. Maybe if I'm feeling really, really bored, I park an employee in front of a packet log. I've actually seen that, by the way. That's how they said they reviewed their logs, is someone watched the log all day. It was very effective. So we have these 4 options. We now also have low likelihood, high likelihood, low impact, high impact. So if I have something that is low, if I have a risk that is very low impact and very low likelihood, which of the 4 options do I pick? Accept. Right. What about if I have something that is a very high likelihood, but a very low impact? Nope, we got 4 options. One of them's taken. This is actually what you avoid. So what if I have something that has an extremely high impact, an extremely low likelihood? The other thing you can also, so when you draw this, you can also draw this as cost, if this helps. Those two aren't related, but it helps people think about it. So if I've got something that is an extremely high impact but very low cost, it's where you actually do, you transfer it.
Earthquake insurance.
Right. So low chance of happening, but when it happens, it's bad. Okay? And then last but not least, the stuff that is high impact and high chance of happening, we mitigate. So when you're developing a report, I'm kind of bleeding into this, by the way, but when you develop a report, you have to think about what is the client going to do? Now, we never recommend our clients accept the risk formally, because actually as a firm, you could take on a liability doing that. But I will have conversations with them all the time, right? Sometimes we report on things that are a little silly. We do it because from the perspective of a professional services firm, there are times if I have 1,000 issues, there may be 15 I feel like I should report on, and 5 I take on a liability as a firm if I don't report on.
Yep.
And a lot of times those are things like a publicly facing site that's barely used with cross-site scripting, or things like that, because there is a reputational risk. We can talk about types of risk if you want to too, or if you want to as well. But so we report on these things and we're like, look, a lot of our clients just accept the risk on this, but we present risks. So when we generate a report, we have this in mind, but we don't make recommendations here. We simply present a risk and options to fix it that are in all of these areas. We do actually make recommendations for clients. Get cyber insurance. And we'll list firms. But in that same recommendation, you will also see, here's how you fix this. Here are some options for monitoring this. And here are some maybe places that you want to consider doing some cyber insurance. Specifically, a lot of times with like injection attacks, websites and other things, the injection attacks we tell them to fix. But generalized issues around a web server, we will recommend a lot of things. Same thing with ransomware.
Yeah. There's usually you'll hear kind of common language about things. So severity, what you heard me say, severity is really the likelihood times impact. You'll hear things like, that's an informational finding, or a low severity, medium severity, high, critical. That scale helps understand where we're sitting and sort of what's getting priority in the report.
That sounds like a lot of vulnerability scanners, like when they give you a severity,
Yeah.
it's not very accurate.
No.
They have any context, so like a lot of times.
Nessus will report SMB crypto using MD5 as a high severity, and like I would never put that higher than a low.
I might not even report on it depending on the situation.
You know, sure, it's definitely, it's not a priority.
No.
You know, but if it's something where the organization has incredibly bad Windows SMB hygiene,
Yeah.
then maybe it matters, right? And this is where everything kind of becomes contextual. But yes, never trust a tool severity rating on face value. Even something like Nessus, where it's like, oh no, look, see, I can SQL inject this as a consultant. Test that. Tools are so notoriously bad at false positives. And if you report a false positive to the client, they're going to be very unhappy. And that your reputation sinks for that. Are we kind of jonesing into consulting?
Yes, we kind of are.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. I can't remember all of them every time.
I don't even know what you're remembering. So
These are the types of risk.
great.
Let's see, strategic, reputational, financial, compliance. That's the one I always forget. I looked it up.
Regulatory.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay, so there are 5 types of risk. And so I guess general to the audience. So some of these are pretty straightforward. You get hacked. Financial risk. Okay, Yeah, we lose money. We lose customers. We have to spend money resolving it. We have to pay a ransom. Those are financial risks. Reputational risks are kind of fuzzy, but I think everybody probably knows what that means too, right? People stop shopping with us. Strategic, well, let's take strategic last. Operational risk. So I get hacked. I have
Visa can't process payments
right.
because their data center's down.
So there were 33 municipalities in Texas last week. Is that the number? Was it 33? Yeah. 33 municipalities in Texas that had ransomware. A large number of them couldn't process tickets. So now we have an operational risk and a financial risk. Very rarely are things only one, right? A lot of them are all the above. Now, why did they get that? Well, this actually now the Texas Department of State is starting to look into their information security. This has created a compliance risk for them. If you're a publicly traded company, under Sarbanes-Oxley, they might start coming at you if you do certain things. So you've created a compliance risk. The last is strategic risk, and that is you lose focus and lose sight of whatever it is that you were working on before. So IT, ransom happens, we'll keep coming back to that issue. Suddenly now all the things that you were planning on doing in the future, you have to stop because you've got to fix all of those issues in the past.
Would something like, say, important intellectual property on company strategy or project plans that gets stolen, that would fall under the strategic one, right?
That would fall under strategic. The loss of intellectual property could also be a strategic risk because now you have given your competitors a strategic advantage over yourself, or you have lost your strategic advantage or competitive advantage over them, right? So these are very broad, but these are the 5 types of risk. Again, we don't include this in our report, but it's very important to know and understand that here are all of the things that you have and the things that you need to just be doing.
Like, example, Visa, I'll come back to that. Visa gets hacked and they take down a data center and Visa can't process payments. Where's the risk there? Is it strategic?
Yes,
Why?
because they have to completely shut down what they were doing, go back, figure out, how, what went wrong, get it back up again, and they're going to be spending months, if not years, trying to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Would you consider that, though, the primary
No.
issue?
No.
Which one would you say was primary?
Operational management.
Exactly. Those are the 2. Reputationally, who's going to stop using their Visa card? We all have, we could say that, but like in a world where we're one out of how many millions of people that has a Visa card, Visa's not worried about that. They're worried about these 2, right?
So
But when you do that consulting gig for Visa, knowing that, understanding how their business works, this is how you understand business impact. When I see a vulnerability that could potentially take something down, what is it taking down in the context of the business, and how does that system factor into the overall risk of the organization?
So let's say you're
Visa's HR system.
So let's say you're a regional bank, right? Reputational, if you manage one city,
Mm-hmm.
the reputational loss could be huge.
Yeah.
You lose a lot of customers because you end up in the local paper, everybody starts talking about it. Let's say you're Target. Does anybody know how long it took after the breach for their stock to come back? Which is a nice measurement of sentiment and reputation. 2 months, 7 weeks. So yeah, they don't care.
Citi didn't even take, I don't think they even lost
But
market cap.
But Wells Fargo, not a hack, but they, however, have noted a significant decrease in overall reputation and business after their recent issues. Not an IT hack, but certainly not a cybersecurity issue, but a risk.
Mm-hmm.
So the type of risk that a company may prioritize depends both on their operations, their scale, and like what's happening.
And their business and their employees and their culture.
What makes their heartbeat?
Right.
Right. What is the heart of their company? And if you stuck an arrow through that, like what would tank them? And every company's different on that that answer.
And you have to think internal and external.
Right.
I have had clients that have had risks appear that greatly impacted the morale and culture of their internal employees that have severely diminished their ability to do business to the point of the one I'm thinking of no longer exists. They got purchased by someone else because they were an all-star, they were on a high trajectory, and some things happened internally, cybersecurity related, that just gutted the heart of the company, which was its employees. And people now no longer, essentially it caused them to start CYAing all the time instead of being agile, working towards things, and then ultimately they plateaued as an organization. And you could argue that may have happened anyway, but you look at that, it was almost a one-to-one kind of correlation, and suddenly now they no longer exist. They're just a piece of software for someone else. So, cover your...
Well, it's looking at the compliance you have for the legal. Is that the group?
Let me, yeah, I can, do you know what GDPR is?
I probably heard of it.
It's the general data
What
privacy
about
rule.
SEC? You're a public company.
Yeah, it's soft.
You're a public company. You have a data breach. The SEC sees that headline and starts investigating you. How much do you think that costs your company to deal with an SEC investigation?
How much? I don't know.
Oh, you look like executive shorting stocks or selling stocks?
No, I'm saying your company got
Hacked.
all of your data got stolen out of Amazon S3.
Yeah.
And the SEC saw this and said, you're a public company, you're supposed to have security controls. What's going on? They start sending out subpoenas. They don't start with subpoenas. They start with knocking at the door nice and friendly. You going to let us in? And even that, armies of lawyers at your company are going to have to take the time and deal with them, which in turn, they're going to turn around to all of your internal folks and take their time and attention away from other things. And so
You have to think, well, I think, what do I tell them? What do I not tell them?
Well,
they stop.
you never think, what do I not tell them at that point? Because if
Right.
you're caught not telling them something, that is actually negligence, and you personally may go to jail.
Or like evade.
Even if you do that, if you are being evasive, they can call that, they can basically put that under corporate negligence.
Is anybody in here a lawyer? Great. Don't try and be one.
Yeah. Go to your lawyers if that ever happens to you.
Go to, and lawyers plural, go to multiple lawyers. Get a good legal opinion from a set of people. Don't echo chamber with one person who says, I'm a lawyer, I know what to do in this situation. Make sure there's consensus, listen to the legal team. Don't try and consider what you should and shouldn't be saying. That's their job as lawyers. You're at that point more of a material witness than anything.
Or an executive, right? So if it's your company, then work with your executives because they will have a team of lawyers that will be deciding what to do. If they are saying that you personally caused something, oh yeah, time to lawyer up. Maybe get a couple personally.
The point I'm making,
that should be rare. That shouldn't really happen.
Is that regardless of, I mean, what are the outcomes of that? They could spend 18 months doing an investigation to say, okay, well, you were actually, there was nothing you could have done that was reasonable. That was still millions of dollars. And I don't know how much time it cost the company in terms of human hours.
And you can't
to deal
recoup
with
that.
this. Can't
If
recoup
they
that.
come out at the end and say, oh no, you were good, you still paid for all of it.
Yeah.
It's actually part of being a publicly traded company that you agreed to.
They could come out and say there's fines. They could sanction you. You know, a lot of times the settlements that they come to with things like the FTC and whatnot are negotiated basically saying, okay, we agree that you'll put these kinds of sanctions and restrictions and we'll pay this much money and blah, blah, blah. All of that is cost. And at the end of the day, when you're considering risk, this is what you're thinking about is like, what is my risk of like having regulatory enforcement cause me harm to the business, cause the business harm. And that's not to say that regulations are inherently going to cause harm. It's more, is a regulation times my action or inaction equate to risk to the business?
And so we're talking about technically an unregulated industry because they just got Sarbanes-Oxley.
Right.
Talk about regulated industries, right? Healthcare, you have HIPAA. Banks, you have GLBA. Energy and utilities, you have NERC. I mean, there's a hodgepodge of, I mean, for government contractors, you've got
practices acts for all sorts of
stuff. You may have NIST requirements depending on your industry, and some of those have cybersecurity requirements, but maybe not, right? But they still all deal with risk. And a lot of this compliance risk, I mean, right, you think about, so I used to do a bunch of work in like hospitals and banks. They have entire compliance teams whose sole responsibility is going around the organization and dealing with this. And they're kind of the second line of defense. So in security, right, your first line of defense is IT. Your second line of defense is the security team, making sure IT is securing stuff. Your third line of defense is you actually have someone come in and audit both security and IT to validate that they're doing what they say they're doing. And technically, then the fourth line of defense, you also have your executives and board who are supposed to be overseeing your auditors to make sure they're independent enough to validate that the first two lines are doing things right. And in highly regulated companies or publicly traded companies, you almost always see all four of those units inside a business being involved.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in IT, right? Let's say it's a hospital. You will have a first line, which is maybe your nurses and doctors and surgery. You will have a second line that's doing reviews and coding and other stuff, and an audit team that deals with that. In engineering, you find the same thing. So,
anything else on red team strategies?
So we're at 7. We've only got through 1.
Yeah, we're gonna. we got about another 20, 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Other red team strategy stuff.
I would also say, in general, this stuff is where I see the biggest gap in security people. Is we all understand technology. Understanding this plus being a technologist makes you invaluable. And if you can communicate it, come find me, I'll hire you.
Except if you don't have a degree.
Unless you don't have a degree.
Yes.
Everybody's in a school right now, so I would assume degrees are forthcoming. Go ahead.
No, what'd you say?
No, come on.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Last note from me on that. Keep in mind as you're out in the world, if you end up being a consultant, your point of contact in the company is probably a security manager, an engineering manager. They're hiring you to do this assessment. It could be a director.
Compliance.
They might not have a good understanding of how risk and business impact actually manifest in their company.
Yeah.
It is very possible that if you sat down and asked them, what are the what's the biggest risk to the company? What are the things that you see every day that are keeping you up at night? That if you asked that same question to the CEO, they'd be on 2 different realms of existence.
And I would also say, so one of the things that we will do is like security governance. I don't do this as much, but I've done it a couple times because I've wanted to get the experience. And we were going through and identifying, basically we interviewed every department inside the company and started to talk to them about what is the risk. We brought everything back to an annualized loss expectancy, an ALE. And that is basically how many dollars will we lose for every hour that we can't do this process. And in the end, we sat down with the executives, all the C-levels from the CEO, and this was a pretty big company that y'all would probably know, so a lot of money in the room. And there were some things we found, they're like, well, I mean, you'd lose a couple $1 million a week, and they laughed and they said, now we don't care, next. But the people we were talking to were like, holy crap, we would lose $1 million a week. Huge difference. When you're a multi-billion-dollar company. And so what that actually then informed was, where are they spending their time and their money? And we found some things that were going to be potentially large losses to the company if they had a problem.
To close out on red team strategies, not just in writing reports, but what we've just covered, keep that in mind in every step of your assessment. So as you're starting your scans and going through your scan results, and you're looking at network diagrams that you found on the corporate wiki, and you're looking through code that was just available on an internal code repository, start to build a picture of how the company operates. How does this business operate? What's the central nervous system? What's the brain and heart of this business? And where am I going to start poking and looking to identify risk? Because at the end of the day, I see so many people be like, look what I found. It didn't matter.
I would also add OSINT.
Mhm.
I see a lot of pen test firms ignore it or not do anything with it. So open source intelligence, right? You can't, until you're under contract, you can't probe your client, you can't actively test against them. And you may not, if you're in the consulting business, you may not want to spend time doing OSINT because that costs you money. But once a contract is signed, we immediately go into that. What can I find online? And I will tell you, the red team we're doing right now, I was huge. We had an issue because of some things on Pastebin and Stack Overflow that were publicly available. And it was actually perfect because we worked it into our social engineering campaign, went right after the person was on Stack Overflow, and guess what they did?
I want to make a point that advice is not a like under the breath CPTC recommendation. Now,
No.
Do we do some OSINT stuff with CPTC? Sure.
Yes.
But I actually think that in terms of the magnitude that OSINT provides in the real world, it's critical. Every time I've done a pen test where I didn't do a good job in OSINT up front, it was way harder.
Yeah.
And I felt way more blind than if I did that work up front. And frankly, it got to the point where like, no, I'm hungry. If I'm going to do an assessment on a client, I'm going to do OSINT because it's going to just open up so many doors. I mean, even little things like, what is the scheme that they do usernames? Some companies, first letter, last name. Some companies, first name dot last name. You don't know these things, but you'll probably have to do some sort of account testing. You know, you're trying to get into OWA, you're trying to get into Outlook 365, something. You need to know what their username scheme is.
And
right?
and
these are things you'll find in OSINT.
We did that on OSINT. I can't really tell you the letters, but it was essentially 2 letters that was the same for every single user in the company. If I told you the 2 letters, you know the company. So, but 2 letters, the company, and then 6 numbers. So it became real easy to brute force all of their users. And we found it in OSINT.
Things like, especially if you're doing physical pens, finding somebody who has a picture online of their badge out, great. Now I can go into Photoshop and make my own. You know, I mean, these are
email signatures
bread and
are
butter.
huge.
Yeah.
Just you'd be amazed that if you put the right signature stuff, footer in the bottom of an email and it's formed the same way everybody else in the company does it, it's an instant in.
Start building social graphs.
Yeah.
I do this. I'll build social graphs of, you know, what are the different players in the company, who's been there a long time, who looks like the head honchos in the various departments, or people, you know, who are the go-to folks, and build out what those relationships are. And if you start doing phishing, you know, start seeing who people respond to. Maybe you say, oh yeah, Greg over in, you know, IT sent me your way, right? That type of interaction can really make or break something.
Or an admin of an executive.
Oh yeah.
You can find the name of an
assistants.
admin and then start using their name.
Yes.
Huge.
So how do you do MFA?
How you do what?
How do you deal with MFA?
MFA?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Begrudgingly.
Depends on how it's implemented.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the scope. It depends on the scope of the assessment. If it's a well-constructed MFA system and I don't have physical access, and there's no, like, physical's not in scope, really hard. You know, it's something where you start to look at secondary objectives around, like, okay, what points of entry don't require MFA?
Kind of a side channel type attack on the implementation.
We'll do this exercise. Let's imagine that we have single sign-on for, you know, let's say the entire company's on Google Apps and has single sign-on through all, you know, Google through G Suite, and has MFA turned on. What points of entry still exist electronically? That be 2FA. There's stuff in a company though that won't have 2FA.
Email sometimes.
Sending an email, so I can send an email, and maybe you click on that. You can put in your credentials, but at the end of the day, it's a narrowed point of entry on that, because what I need you to do is download my payload so I can get onto your box, because if I steal your credentials, it's still not going to get anything. Yes.
SSH usually
True, but some do. But you're going in the right direction. What else? What?
The workstation.
Legacy stuff.
Who here uses any kind of programming language whatsoever? Python. Who has done a pip install of anything ever? Do you 2FA to pip install anything? No. Dependency management, libraries, software builds, none of that is 2FA'd. And there's no good solution for that right now.
So in the interest of keeping us moving forward too, I'm going to add something else, and I'm also going to make the same comment Alex had, and this is not an underhanded CPTC thing, is actually harvesting information out of the systems you get.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot tell you the number of red teams I have been on where going to an Exchange box and writing a PowerShell query against all the users I can read for the word password has given me more access.
Go to the internal wiki.
Or
start
going to an
searching.
internal SharePoint site or a wiki
Yep.
and doing something similar. Going through file shares, right? Everybody's got Windows and Unix file shares.
Who here uses Meterpreter, has used Meterpreter for anything ever? Port forwarding, the most important uses of Meterpreter port forwarding ever are to port forward to internally accessible websites so you can harvest information out of them.
And I would add shares.
Shares, RDP, so port
RDP.
forwarding to ports, but like frankly, the most the times when port forwarding through Meterpreter has saved the test has been on the ones where it's gotten me into an internal SharePoint.
Oh, see, for me, it's been SharePoint or Windows file shares.
Mm-hmm.
It's been one or the other, and using the Windows indexing service to your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Learn some PowerShell and get it to do your search for you.
Yes.
So learn how to do a proper query search in Windows. Whether it's, if you already peed into the box and the little thing in the top right, it's the same syntax as if you do it through PowerShell or WLAN.
Do we want to just, I don't know that this is going to be a big thing to cover. Do you have anything to add on this?
Actually, frankly, everything we've already talked about, right? Risk. Balancing availability versus security would be risk to me.
Do you feel like it, was there anything else you wanted us to expand on?
Maybe I still.
Go ahead. No, come on.
I feel like maybe this touches on strategic risk, because in prioritizing security, whether it's operations, whether you're just a user, I worry sometimes about the effects that can, just have on operations, slowing you down, like putting paranoia before clock time.
Yes.
People in our industry, I see a lot of places sell through FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that to me is crippling and gets a lot of people to step away from the table. I don't know if that's what you're talking about and what your thoughts are, but I mean, I feel like if you sell risk as whether you're a researcher talking about an issue or you're in my shoes where you're a consultant trying to go to the Fortune 500, right? Both of these are, if you go with just here's all the reasons you should be afraid, people won't listen. But if you focus, strategically though, if you focus on here is risk and here is how we'll help you understand it and get to a tolerance, I think it's better. Because strategically people stop listening if you just focused on bad. I don't know if that's what you were getting at, but.
So like how you, let's say if you do this, it'll help you make more money, is that what you think, but it's positive, whereas.
It's okay to say you will have a potential loss, but there's a way you do it, right? There's a difference between, oh my God, hackers are bad, hackers are coming for you, versus, well, what we want to do is look at doing a test of your environment to identify some of the major risks that you have to help you understand both your existing risk, but also help you to start to build a tolerance for where you want your risk to be. The same message, two very different.
I'm going to give you an answer to that from the non-consulting perspective.
Maybe I'm being too consulting fluffy. Sorry, you can call me out on that.
Yeah. I'm with you. I sit inside a company all day, and something that I've learned over my career is that hackers are bad. There's always going to be some shit. Always. There's always, and in fact, the pace of it is getting more and more. And frankly, I think that's not because the world is becoming less secure. I think frankly, it's because information dispersal is becoming so much more prevalent. So there's just so many more avenues to disseminate information now that it's information overload, just like on social media and how we experience that, sociologically in our culture. Same thing professionally. There's so much information out there that it's very easy to read it and think, oh God, the world is the most insecure place. My company's fucked and everything is not okay. And if you let that as a security professional drive where you go, you're doing the company more harm than good, actually.
I have a good story, I think, for this too.
My old boss, when I was a consultant, Chris Nickerson, used to tell this, kind of give this, I'm going to bastardize the way his spiel that he said here is, there is only so much time, even with all the money in the world, you have 24 hours. There's not enough human bodies to secure everything. Even if we did, what's the friction going to be to the organization? At the end of the day, you have limited resources, finite resources. Consider how you get the most bang for your buck with those resources to mitigate the risk that we talked about on the board. And if that means that you really only can focus on one or two things, focus on them and do them well, right? Don't try and spread yourself so thin that you can't execute on stuff. Like be aware of be honest about the resources it's going to take to accomplish your goals, to move it's all about moving the needle on risk, and it's going to constantly evolve. So that needle is going to constantly want to push back, and you're going to constantly want to be driving it forward. And at the end of the day, don't measure yourself in sort of this absolute way. Consider like how the pace of your evolution is going, right? Like think about this in 3, 6, 12, and 18-month intervals where you're like, okay, what can I do in the next 3 months to really reduce some risk around here? And if that's one project, great. But if you take on 10 projects and you don't do any of them, what have you done for 3 months?
And I feel like a lot of people want to see, they think about perfect security, especially when you're new to the industry, you get into a company. It's not a matter of, I hear a lot of no.
Yeah.
Can we do this? No. Guess what? The business has more power than you. So they're just going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I tell people is never say no. Let's figure out a yes, but. How do we make this so that we can do it and still feel comfortable? And frankly, we also have to tell leadership, okay, we're never going to get to perfect because, please don't fire me if something happens. There's a lot of other things that can happen. To get to your point though, about like availability and security, I have a good story about this. So there's an organization that I'm the part-time ISO of, and a client that I have. And they have a team. It was 6 people at the time. It's a little more now. And so this may be a good segue into Splunk. So they brought Splunk in, and it sat there for 2 years. No one used it because of a little bit of licensing, but B, no one ever spent the time to configure it or to do anything with it, which is very common. You get a lot of security tools that people buy that they don't do much with.
Wait, but isn't it free, like you scan internal network?
It's free for up to 500 gig or 500 megs a day.
Yeah, it's like
It's minuscule amount per day. So they had it sitting there. They were paying for it. And I was just like, why do we have this on the budget if we're not going to use it?
Right.
So we figured it out, what it was going to cost. And I actually went to the leadership team and said, I want an FTE on Splunk. I want to hire someone in as a Splunk engineer. And when they saw the number, they were like, whoa, no. So we talked about it, and I came back. And again, now I am in the lucky position of when you're a third party, people often listen to you more. So they did. We brought in a Splunk engineer. We actually started to develop things. That's not the win. The win here was, at one point, we were sitting in a meeting with the IT team, the internal people working on the help desk, actually, and they were having a real issue tracking something. And it was causing a lot of serious pain for them. Like 2 hours of one of their help desk technicians' day was spent getting this piece of data. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm fairly certain we have this in Splunk. So I went to the Splunk engineer and called him and just said, hey, we have this, right? He's like, oh yeah, what do you want? So 20 minutes later, he wrote a query, and every day they now got an email giving them this information. I will tell you now, that company has 5 Splunk engineers. One of them does security. That guy is now a manager, and the other 3 work entirely for the IT team and business teams. They have actually started to throw other pieces of information that aren't even related to IT into Splunk so that they can search on it and report on it. So from an enablement perspective, of buzzwords, it became a huge win for security, right? Because now we justified all of this by making the business better. It doesn't happen very often, but when you can balance those two, man, it's a unicorn story in my experience. The only time it's happened that I know of it happening. But I mean, it was awesome.
World without Splunk, fastest.
Oh yeah, sorry,
We
we've
can
got
get
like
that.
3 minutes.
That's all right.
7 minutes.
Let's start with this. What is Splunk? And let me preface with, there's all sorts of reasons you might love or hate Splunk in the world. I'm not even going to get into the pain points you could incur with Splunk. Should you do hosted Splunk? Should you do on-prem? Not even going to get into that. We're talking architecturally in your environment. Let's talk about the components. Let's try and decompose what Splunk is, how you use it, and look at what the components that make it up are. So what is, I mean, these systems are input and output. What's input for Splunk? What is machine data?
Well, like an Elasticsearch.
So we have logs, so we have inputs. We have outputs.
Inputs can be anything. I have seen Splunk used for data analytics.
Interfaces.
API data would be an input.
What'd you say?
API data.
API data, so would you say maybe application data?
Yeah.
So we use Splunk as like a regular database for like doing pen tests and stuff. Like when we find a finding, we just throw it in Splunk so you just get it.
Okay, so we would maybe call that unstructured data.
Project information, tasks.
What are the outputs of Splunk? Yes. Alerts. We'll get to that. That's a good one.
So reporting, the dashboards, user interface aspects of it. So you can have visual reports on dashboards, you can have scheduled email reports.
We'll call that crons. You said dashboards. Search. Let's talk about the search component. What is Splunk search doing? Like when you run a query in Splunk, I mean, yes, as somebody who's used Splunk, I'll often be like, oh, let me just put an IP address in and then magically stuff comes back. But there's a lot more you can do with Splunk search. What is that actually doing? It allows you to do essentially, I think, pivots and joins. Correlation. So what we're going to call this interface is Splunk is an interface to correlate, join, or transform. And so you have these outputs. If you were going to build this in your enterprise and Splunk had never existed, what facilities exist in the world for these things? So Suricata is going to be an input because it's going to report data. So we're going to say
So our condas go into logs. I think app and unstructured data, pretty, say Nginx. We'll say,
Flawless for app data, like vulnerability scanner data.
yep. Qualys. And you can have Qualys go into Splunk today. There's a Splunk integration for it.
I built my
You can actually put like Archer and Risk platforms.
Absolutely.
You can put core apps. You can put
Ultimately, though, what is this activity that is happening here? Call it. Ingestion.
not what you get after you eat Taco Bell. But
And then another word, telemetry. Telemetry, I would define as the data, point-in-time data that is immutable. A log being emitted by something, a Qualys scan, these are all things that we don't manipulate. The log line, the data blob is what it is. Telemetry. And what are we doing? What's our verb? We are ingesting it. Okay. How do we ingest it? What tools out there let us ingest inputs? There's one that's built into Linux that's been around for years.
Syslog.
Syslog. So you've got Syslog. You've got
Windows Event Manager.
yeah. Windows event logs and Win. You've got Logstash, which if you've ever used Elasticsearch and Kibana, Logstash is the component of the ELT stack that gets data into Elasticsearch.
You've got like 60 seconds.
Yeah, we got a little bit. All right.
You got a little bit?
Ultimately, ingestion is the transportation of this data into your data store. Splunk has their own proprietary data store. This is where search, regardless of we're not even talking dashboard yet, we're talking indexing of data. So you have to ingest, you have to index, you have to store in some scalable way. In a company of any decent size, that's a reasonable engineering problem. How do you do that? Is Splunk the only database in the world? What other database exists?
Microsoft Excel.
Not something you would ever store logs in.
But technically correct.
No, I was joking about Excel. They use it.
I was trying to think, is Excel actually,
Well, it's not technically a database. It's a spreadsheet, but people use those databases.
It meets all the qualifications of the database.
Yes.
You can search, you can index, there's a data store, there's
so SQL
More relational.
SQL is a language. SQL does not tell me what a database is. SQL is a interface to a database, but it itself is not the data store. What
MongoDB or?
Mongo is a data store. MySQL is a data store that uses SQL to interface with it. Postgres, you've got all kinds of places where you can store data, but they all share very similar properties. And this is part of the magic that Splunk does for you, is the best ones out there that aren't Splunk, you have to know your schema. You have to have some structure to your data, and you have to have some knowledge of that structure. If you can do that though, you don't need Splunk. This is where correlate, joins, and transform come into play. You have an ingestion pipeline, it's going into your data store. Your data store has some interface to do this. Usually it's SQL. SQL's a great one. There's a ton of knowledge around it in the world. It's actually one of the biggest, I think, problems with Splunk is it locks you into a language that is unique to Splunk.
Yeah.
SQL you can transfer around. Yes.
So one of the things I noticed about Splunk is that it's super hella slow. But SQL tends to be really quick. I've never seen like a SQL database being searched through with as much data as you sometimes see in Splunk. Is the speed actually faster with SQL, or is it like the same or even worse?
So SQL has nothing to do with the speed of retrieval. It's the underlying database engine that has to do with it.
Right.
So there's SQL.
I mean, so I spent some time actually as a developer for Federal Express. So package information, there is a lot. Millions of records an hour on packages. And you will find that if you write the query the right way and you have created a database schema that is correct, we would be able to query that information in seconds. If we did it wrong, it would take hours.
Where I work,
So it's very subtle.
we've got a data lake with probably 2 exabytes of data. We don't use any Splunk. So it was cost prohibitive. I can run a SQL query on who accessed this internal tool, on when this user accessed this internal tool, that I'll get results back in less than a minute.
It's actually where like database administrators understand how, like, it's a whole different paradigm of programming, and understanding it is.
And I'm happy to go into the actual engineering aspects of that when we have more time. But that's actually, it's a great question of like, why is Splunk feel slow? Well, how it works under the hood is very different from how a lot of databases work. And this is, ultimately where I would take this talk given time would be, we have this is the worst United States drawing ever.
Thanks for making Texas huge, though. I appreciate that.
We have USA, and there's Splunk Island. The database they use under the hood, it'll never matter to you because it's a black box, proprietary, their own thing. The query language, black box, proprietary, their own thing. How you build integrations with it, black box, proprietary, their own thing. Ultimately, if you lock yourself into this as an organization, you have no out. And there's a lot of people who will talk about Splunk as if it was heroin. It's an addictive drug in the sense that, like, once you lock in, it's very hard to unlock yourself from it, because you'll build all of your tooling around it, because your tooling has to be built on Splunk Island, not on Open Island.
Data migration would be nightmare.
I've just spent 2 years migrating. We were aggregating data, just security events. We were doing 2 terabytes a day. Yeah, 2 terabytes a day with 18 months hot retention on that. So close to probably 50 petabytes in total to migrate out of that. Yeah, I mean, that's getting that. It took 2 years to go from here to here, and it's a mess here right now, but we're off of it.
Imagine they hike the price, right?
They do.
Slowly, or
And look, it's a great product in terms of its usability. In fact, it's one of the reasons why they're winning, is because a lot of these things haven't gotten it right yet.
Yeah, and it's a lot of things combined.
Right, it's doing all of this stuff. We didn't even get to the interfaces, the dashboard, the usability as an investigator, right? Like, there's all sorts of things that they're providing you that, they're taking ingestion, they're taking indexing, they're taking storage, they're taking interfaces, whether that's programmatic interface or that's a user interface. They're taking the ability to generate reports, the ability to write alerts, all of this stuff, and they're bundling it into one application. So people say, oh, I have Splunk. For what purpose? Have you considered what your organization needs? If you need an event engine that can handle thousands, looking at thousands of events a second, Splunk might not be the rules engine for you.
Well, the other thought I have on it, so even if you get all that data into Splunk, it doesn't actually do anything for you. So you have someone working on Splunk to actually build out the different SIM use cases if you're using it for security, building out all the alerts and all the data engineers that you want to report on.
Exactly.
But now you're kind of talking about like solution architect.
I actually think it's the biggest deficit right now in InfoSec is we don't have enough people who consider how to be good architects and engineers around information management and engineering systems that actually power security. We have a lot of people that think about security as this science and this art where, oh, I read the CISSP handbook, so I have an understanding of how to tell my company that this is good or bad, but without the ability to actually consider what
the business aspect of it.
Yeah, and to engineer a solution
Yeah.
to a problem, we call how many people in our industry security engineers, and I think probably half of them are not actually good engineers.
How many people spend their time being an analyst
Yeah.
versus actually fixing a problem?
Right. You know, and fixing problems is, I've learned the hard way. You can certainly Google and Stack Overflow your way through a problem, but understanding how to do that for a architecture that will actually last for the business, right? It's every company I've ever seen is constantly ripping out old, putting in new, because the person who built the old did
Or left.
Consider something.
Or
left, but didn't build didn't build this system or architect this system for the future. They built it for the right now, to meet the need right now. And not saying you have to entirely encompass the scope as what is this going to look like in 2-3 years, but consider it, right? I mean, that's the whole point of good, strong engineering, is like architects who build buildings, they don't want their building to fall down in 10 years. We should be considering the same concepts in security.
And I would add to what Alex is saying that I also feel like a lot of people they're tie themselves to a tool. I think that's one reason I feel like I've done fairly well is you understand the basics of technology. You understand Linux, you understand Windows, you understand the OSI model. You can do security. You can teach anybody security if they understand how to build something. And a lot of people, to your point, I have clients that, oh, well, we started with Splunk and now we moved to QRadar and now we're on Logarithm, and it was because, well, the Splunk person left. The Splunk guy left, and then they got a QRadar girl, and then she left and they turned around and got someone that knew Logarithm. And it was, I want the tool. It shouldn't matter. You should understand.
The tool doesn't matter, the capability it provides does.
And are you, even if you are using tools, are you engineering a solution for your company?
And that talk that I shared with you, that is the entire point of it, is talking about how do you engineer an incident response team for a company.
So you gotta pick a date and do it.
Let's email, and I'm local, so whenever. We will do one good CCDC story each from a red team.
You want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
Go ahead.
All right. I got one. So we were on a team, and the team had taken their management workstations and joined them to their domain. So what did that mean? Well, of course, the red team appreciates you, so we appreciated the fact that you were on your domain and that we had taken it over and that you had joined the systems that you were actively working on all day to that domain. So using our domain administrator account, of which we had several, because we also appreciated the fact that they set up many different accounts, we logged into that and we did some fun things, like we were listening to the microphone and other stuff. But the evil thing, and I do feel a little bad about doing this, is spent the entire day getting a screenshot every 3 minutes. And whenever I saw Word up, I waited and waited. And every time it looked like they were about done with the inject, I crashed it. And it configured it not to autosave. So the best part about this was it took about 5 or 6 times doing this over and over again before someone on the team finally said, hey, I am fairly certain my workstation has been hacked. Instead of, hey, I'm fairly certain Word has been crashing. So, I don't know, that's probably the best lesson learned I've gotten away from. Good story. We once also had at a regional, we had a team that refused to follow the instructions of the CEO and decided to get into a verbal argument with the CEO aggressively and outright told the CEO no, and proceeded to do this over 3 or 4 interactions with them. And so the CEO actually went to the white team and said, can I fire this person? And they did. They actually fired a member of the team at the regional.
Wait, isn't the CEO like the judge or something?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's like,
Yeah. Every other team's like, we don't agree with this. We don't think we should do it. Too bad. And they figured out a way to work around it.
You really inspired my story because I had forgotten about this memory.
I've got a few technical ones
This
if we want to talk
is
through those.
different, same vein. Trusting your injects, mostly your responses to injects. He prevented you from submitting your injects. I was a little bit more rude.
2 years ago? Yeah.
I've done this multiple times.
Okay.
What do you do when you're done with your inject? You go to the portal, you upload it, or you email it as an attachment. What happens in the time between when you save that and when it gets sent?
Oh.
I'm very well known for spiking your inject punch bowl, if you will, and leaving messages that black team's not and white team are going to be very unhappy about when they open your report that you're supposed to talk about what is the risk of having SSH open to the company, and it's just nothing but memes. You're not going to get points for the inject, and almost certainly they're going to have lots of questions. There isn't a good answer to how to prevent that.
I mean, preventing good OPSEC.
Yeah, the answer is if that happens once, you're compromised and deal with that, right? You know, don't be like, oh, let's just write another inject. No, it's just going to happen again.
A couple of years ago at Nationals, Dan Borges and I, they had a point of sale system that they had to use. And Dan and I had taken the memes Trojan that was based on memes and combined it with a few other things. So this Trojan, I don't know if anybody has experienced it because we've reused it a few other places, but it would do one of a random set of things. So it would pop up and said, you have been hacked by the memes Trojan, and then it would immediately overwrite your bootloader with something I'll get to. And then it would do stuff like take your mouse and move it between 10 and 50 pixels in one direction in a random radian, but make it so that Windows still drew it at the original point. Or it would resize your whole screen down, but prevent Windows from redrawing so that everything on the outside would still be there. You would just be 10% smaller. Or it would load Rickroll. It would, load Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up on YouTube, or load random memes and other things. And eventually your computer would become unusable, right? Because your screen would be this big. Your mouse would be over here, but it's drawn here. And you would reboot. And when you're rebooted, you got a bootloader that was the Nyan Cat dancing, and it would play out of your speaker over and over. We're very proud of this, but Dwayne, that runs, the white team captain at Nationals, was sitting in a room
with all of
these point of sale systems and got a little grumpy with us because most of them were playing Nyan Cat all day. And Dan and I were relatively proud of the work that we did on both that and infecting them all.
For some inspiration / stroking some fear in you blue teamers, but hopefully inspiring on the theme of our night of don't think about tools, think about capabilities. I am consistently one of the bloodiest red teamers you'll meet in a CCDC event. And my most common tools are a terminal, a text editor, a browser, and a default Linux install. I don't use Metasploit. I don't use security tools. Nmap is probably the closest I get to an actual security tool, and that's simply for visibility. Almost everything else I do.
What do you mean the machine you used to attack?
Live off the land.
Yeah, live off the land. Everything.
Alex and I have had the opportunity to red team 3 years now together at Nationals.
Yeah.
And a lot of times he takes Linux and I take Windows, and it's the same thing. I'm using PowerShell and built-in Windows commands and AD. We take over a box. The only thing that we're running, or at least that I'm running on it, is all of our C2. Whatever I'm using to get back into it later. Everything else I'm doing is built in. Occasionally, maybe a port scan. But more often than not, you can find a lot with the net command on Windows, WMIC, and PowerShell.
But even on Linux.
Wait, but is
And I'm more of a Windows guy.
Yeah.
I think Empire is like built entirely on PowerShell.
It is, but I'm not talking about using a tool built in PowerShell.
Oh.
I'm talking about
Just
writing PowerShell
Yes.
on the command line as you go, or using. I mean, if you haven't looked at WMI on Windows, there's an entire Windows management instrumentation. It is a SQL-like query language that you can use, and you can connect to other Windows boxes. You can run commands through it. You can change registry keys, and it's all built in. You don't have to install anything.
And I'm not saying that you can't have C2s and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But why use something off the shelf that people can find?
Are y'all familiar with Mimikatz?
Yeah.
Did you know you don't have to have Mimikatz on the box to get all of the LSAS information? You can just dump the process.
Oh, Proctom, right?
You can do, yep.
Proctom, yeah.
And that's sysinternals is owned by Microsoft.
Right, AD Explorer.
Yeah. I have heard tell that.
What's the website we own? I own sysinternals.io or something like
Yeah,
that.
we own a lot of websites that are adjacent.
We
to-
have 450 CCDC phishing domains.
Yeah.
Legit domains.
Like
We
the black
own it.
team forces us to buy them before we can use them.
Right.
So we have to prove we own it, and then they'll give us access to it.
And a number of them have good code sign inserts too.
Yes. And they're all Let's Encrypt.
Which Linux distro?
Ubuntu, default Ubuntu,
Yeah.
default Ubuntu. That's all you need. That's all you need in life. Default. No Kali. Fuck Kali. I'm gonna do that. No,
Sometimes Kali's nice. Sometimes.
I agree.
But I use Ubuntu too, as well.
I like my Mac as it's just a nice experience, and Spotify works great on it, and I can listen to music while I'm hacking. My Linux machines almost never have a GUI of any kind. They're just either VMs or I'm running them on a little side shuttle server or something like that.
I use a lot of Docker stuff too.
He used a lot of Docker. I don't even do a lot of Docker. But I write a lot of code.
Yeah.
Make your own tools.
I'll live write PowerShell. I have a whole, and at work we have a whole OneNote of just PowerShell one-liners, and some of them are like half a page long and barely getting to the limit of what PowerShell will let you put on the hyphen command object. But I've got a port scanner in a one-liner in PowerShell. It works really well, and it never gets caught.
I have a bash port scanner that doesn't even use Netcat. It uses raw Linux dev devices and just enumerates ports in bash.
Yep.
I
Half the
have
time I don't
port
use a port
scanners
scanner.
in many languages that I
Yeah.
can, depending on what's on the box, that can go a lot faster because the bash one is quite slow. But if I need to see if I can pivot through something, the bash
Yeah.
one's great.
A lot of times I don't even port scan. I'll just start looking at like network neighborhood in Windows.
Yeah.
Show me all the stuff.
Linux doesn't have those nice,
Yeah.
discoverability features. So port scanner in maps.
LLMNR and NetBIOS are great.
Don't shy away from writing code. Build your
Yeah.
own tools. Get in the habit of that now. That plays along to the architectural engineering mindset.
And
The difference between security engineers now and 10 years ago is now you kind of need to write code.
Yeah.
Back 10 years ago, you didn't have to write any code. 10 years from now, you must write code.
And I'm not disparaging tools
What'd
at
you say?
all. They're
Do you assembly code or what?
I mean, it's good to have a knowledge of it, but honestly, most of my code is about getting shit done.
But if you know people that are going to get into like malware engineering or reverse engineering, or you're going to go work for an AV company as a researcher, you will need to know a lot. That is just mandatory.
It's really good to have a knowledge of how assembly works and like how the stack works and how a lot of
know what a
binary
mount
executable
is and know what
formats work. Like understand how, like the Linux loader versus the Windows loader work, for example. Those are
Right.
very key components. Learn about how,
ELF
dynamic
or
libraries
CNC
get loaded in
Yeah.
at runtime. I mean, all of these things are low-level stuff that I would say are assembly adjacent that are really helpful, especially when you're trying to weaponize something for any of these platforms. But I mean, the amount of time.
It sounds like you have written scripts that can perform like Metasploit functions.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Our,
Is that for like detectability, like it doesn't get detected, or?
yeah, no, I haven't been detected at by AV in 6 years at CCDC.
Oh, that's.
But you write your own stuff, you never get.
Never.
I mean, it
We
worked.
dropped G-Script this year at Nationals, had 37 payloads. One of the payloads got caught by Windows Defender, and Windows Defender still didn't hit on the G-Script payload, and none of the other stuff got caught.
Yeah.
I think total our persistence kit for Linux was 82 pieces of persistence, local and implant, and Windows was something in the high 70s.
Yeah.
ESXi, we had 5 to 10 bundled implants just for ESXi.
So the important thing here is, like the real world, we're getting in. You can't stop it. So it's find us and contain us.
But as a defender, I do defense all day. And the skill set is entirely transferable in
Yeah.
the sense of, if you can, learning to build your own tools and learning to leverage capabilities to enrich tool sets and capabilities and build those and be sort of the Lego builder of whatever it is you're doing, that will set you free from this one-track vendor mind that most of our industry's in right now.
And we're not saying tools are bad. Tools are good, but they're part of a toolbox. And some of your toolbox needs to be what you've got on the machine. Some of your toolbox needs to be what you've got in your tool set. Some of it needs to be, you've got all these things. And it's being able to be nimble and agile and use the right thing for the right moment.
You know what makes a great agile toolbox? Organization. Are your tools organized?
Yeah.
Do people know how to use them? Are they put together right?
Yep. At work, we have, just a giant Get repo of all of our tools. And they're all organized in a very specific way. Now, the nice thing is they also output to a certain directory. All of our output is organized. All of our, our methodology, certainly, because we all work together, is the same. But when I run a tool, it often automatically is wrapped by a batch file or a bash script that runs itself based on an input from one place that's already in that directory where it's supposed to be, and it outputs it to the exact same other place, so that when someone else needs this data or this data, they know exactly where it is. That probably saves us more time than any amount of scripting. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
So, that's where I need to go.
Yeah, we do. Awesome. Cheers, guys.
Okay, I'll email you. We've got another.
Yes.
And just to summarize, they said just buy Splunk and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Enjoy your last 9 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to turn off this share and I'll post this video later. All right.